Watch this.
Parking in downtown Boise, already a pressing problem. But lately, it's become more of a problem, with prime spaces being claimed by construction crews. Business owners say they are the losers in this competition.
What the legislature's done is take away all the creative ways that we came up with to offer affordable housing and renter protections for Boise residents.
Local control took another hit, with Governor Little agreeing to remove rental protections from becoming possible city ordinances. But Boise's mayor isn't backing down. It's a rush to wrap up the legislative session, with a few fixes to one of Governor Little's priorities being considered. Changes coming to Idaho's school facilities bill.
The folks that are renting, think about like working people in the city aren't going to be protected anymore.
That was Boise Mayor's concern when we spoke with her last week, that the legislature and the governor were going to undo all the protections Boise City Council has created for renters. Mayor Laura McClain expressed her worry on the day House Bill 545 arrived in Governor Little's office. That'd be March 27th. 2 days later, March 29th, Governor Brad Little signed it into law, even though in his transmittal letter, he explained why he signed it. Governor Little points out it has become increasingly difficult for many Idahoans to afford housing. This is the bill, by the way, which is now law, that would prevent any city or county from forcing any property owner to accept payment from a federal housing assistance program like a Section 8 voucher, nor would any landlord have to accept a third-party payment for rent. Any regulation of rent, fees, or deposits, those would also be banned. So here's the thing. Those are all things the city of Boise has added to their city ordinances over the last few years. In 2019, Boise limited rental application fees to $30. Last year, Boise City Council voted unanimously to stop landlords from retaliating against renters who, for example, make repair requests. They made it so any landlord who evicted a tenant to renovate a building, well, they had to return the entire deposit. And in a vote of 5-1 last fall, Boise City Council added source of income to the city's anti-discrimination ordinance, meaning landlords could no longer deny rental applicants based on their source of income, like a Section 8 housing voucher or a third-party payment. Those last three rules went into effect the 1st of this year, but because of 545 now becoming law, beginning the 1st of July, all that goes away.
All of it goes away. Any protections that we created for renters, gone.
Have you had a chance to see his transmittal letter?
I did. I took a look at it.
This third paragraph saying he strongly believes in Idaho's long tradition of respecting, upholding, and defending Idahoans' private property rights. We must have laws in place to protect property owners. The very next sentence, that said, I am also a strong believer in local control, where the locally elected leaders are the best situated to develop solutions that fit their communities and neighborhoods.
I really appreciate his trust in the city council and myself and mayors and city councils around this state, and because we are doing that.
You appreciate that, but he's also taken that away from you.
Well, I appreciate that he's acknowledged a problem, because you got to acknowledge a problem in order to be part of the solution, and also appreciate that he acknowledges that those of us working at the local level in community with our residents are really good problem solvers, because we are.
Does it seem contradictory to you?
Oh, I'm focused on what we're doing here, and it creates a little bit more difficult puzzle for us.
Are you disappointed, or is there another way to describe kind of your reaction to this?
Oh, I'm definitely disappointed and frustrated. Look, this isn't new, where we've passed great ordinances and great laws at the request of our residents who overwhelmingly support them, and then the legislature changes them. And that's super frustrating, but it's not a situation where I'm so frustrated that I just throw in the towel, right? Because I made a commitment to Boiseans that we're going to solve problems. We're going to keep doing that. Requires us then to go back to the drawing board and come up with some ideas. Looking forward to doing that, because we have to ensure that people in Boise can find a home that they can afford without discrimination, without fear of retaliation, and without having to pay a whole bunch of fees that they now have to pay again to try to find an apartment.
More from the governor's transmittal letter. Elected leaders in both rural communities and larger cities are working to address their unique housing needs and challenges, but That's kind of been taken away now. Of course, this isn't completely on the governor. House Bill 545 wasn't his doing completely. Despite most Idahoans, according to this year's Boise State Public Policy Survey, their biggest concern is cost of living and housing, with 40% saying workforce and affordable housing should be the legislature's top priority this session. Well, despite all that, the House passed 545, 59-11, strictly along party lines because they believe in protecting the rights of property owners. The Senate, they passed it 26-9, with 2 Republicans voting against it. And one of those was Senator Abby Lee from Fruitland, whose vote was based on what she heard from constituents.
This is a local issue. This is an issue where communities need to make their decisions. And I pointed to Boise and I said, hey, you know what Boise's doing? That's not going to work in Payette County. But if you have a remedy and if we need to do something, we need to go locally.
Okay, so now those locals, as Mayor McLean put it, will have to get more creative. Think outside the box they've now been put in order to protect renters and address affordable housing. House Bill 545 goes into effect July 1st. Well, as we pointed out a couple of times already these past 2 weeks, there's always this rush at the end of the session to deal with something we knew was coming from the beginning. Governor Little's huge pitch in his State of the State address, that $2 billion to fix school facilities that have been underfunded for decades, was thought to be a done deal when he signed House Bill 521 into law last week. But it seems that bill wasn't, well, fully baked. Let's bring in Joe Paris now, because Joe, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago as well, about 521 when it cleared the Senate. There were going to be some trailer bills that were going to come along to kind of fix the issues that many had with this bill when they voted for it.
Well, it looks like all the trailer bills, Brian, they ended up kind of in one bill altogether here at the end of the session. So the answer to the question from lawmakers about, well, do we have some holes in this 521? The answer seems to be draft more legislation to fix the other legislation. And this is typical. It happens at the end of the legislature every year. But early this morning, a combination of fixes all mixed in together appeared in the House Education Committee. House Bill 766 is 9 pages of pretty in-depth language to address basically 6 different issues that lawmakers saw with 521. Passed the full House a short time ago, and not a single representative voted no. Nobody voted against this. That means they're probably ready to go home. But some lawmakers don't find this type of lawmaking appropriate.
We don't properly vet, in my opinion, when we have so many different topics in a bill. It's difficult to vet every single thing that happens. I thank everyone who has come to the table to deal with this, but I am frustrated that we continually have to come back because we don't properly vet an area. And when we say 521 was only a tax bill, we can see right here it is not a tax bill. These are education issues that should have been vetted properly by the Education Committee.
So one of the comments that Representative McCann there refers to the Idaho Constitution and this idea that legislation should be on a single topic. And for perspective, I asked a veteran, I should say, of Idaho politics for thoughts on the single subject bill question. Lieutenant Governor Scott Bedke, he and I sat down for Viewpoint this past Sunday, and he shared the reality to my question on it.
They're very aware of what the Constitution says, but they're also very aware of what the courts have said with regard to their actions in the past vis-a-vis a single subject. And so if the legislature can see a golden thread through all of the issues, then that has historically satisfied the courts when these things have gone to court. Well, what you had, though, was you had a popular idea. You know, the state is going to get into the business of building schools, and that's property tax relief. So you have a perfectly good vehicle that could drag, if you will, or carry other issues along with it that are, if you squint your eyes and cock your head, you know, you can see the interaction.
So that's the reality of what happens down at the State House. And Brian, the question is, especially here at the end of the session, what can be done in the future to avoid situations we are in right now? Because we heard from lawmakers, and I've privately heard from lawmakers that say, okay, there's a 9-page bill that's got some very intricate language. If there's a mistake made in there, the time between committee and the House floor vote, and this isn't accusing anyone of anything, there's just not enough time, according to some lawmakers, to get through all these things. And you heard from the Senate side that they were upset and had concerns about voting on a resolution about if racism is bad, and they needed more information about something going on up north in North Idaho. So when you circle this back into taxes and education and 4-day school weeks, and you put everything into one bill,
Right.
it can get very complicated.
Well, as I heard Lieutenant Governor Bedke say during that Senate session last week, I believe, when they were passing 521, they decide what's constitutional, I guess, is what he was saying, that the legislature decides that. Courts can get involved, but at some point, they make the rules.
It'll be interesting to see if any lawmakers have ideas on how they could avoid situations like this in the future, or if it's simply a nature of the beast.
That's true. Thanks, Joe.
Many of us did not want to be trans, myself included. I spent years and years trying to convince myself that I wasn't trans, that I was perfectly happy with my body and my assigned gender. It didn't work. It was only by accepting myself for who I was that I freed myself of the shame and disgust that I felt towards myself. I feel so much better now.
That was a reading of an anonymous letter. It was addressed to Governor Little from a transgender person in North Idaho. And that letter was read today at the Capitol as part of a protest to call attention to all the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation being considered at the State House. 48,000 handmade hearts were dropped from the fourth floor of the rotunda to represent the 48,000 Idahoans who identify as LGBTQ plus. That was on the 2020 census. The hearts were handmade by LGBTQ plus Idahoans and their loved ones. They were collected in just 10 days from about 20 cities across the state.
I think the number one message is that there are 48,000 queer Idahoans, that bills that get introduced and passed into law in this House affect all of us, all of our families. We live here, we work here, we raise our families here. We are every skin color, every age group, every socioeconomic status, and we wanted to give a tangible feel to and visual to the amount of people that these bills are really affecting this year.
48,000 Idahoans. That's less than 3% of Idaho's entire population. Considering that, there's been an awful lot of time spent on in the legislature on these bills, like the no public funds for transgender care, which was signed into law last week, or a bill that wants to make sex and gender synonymous. That's this session. Another bill this session that wants to make preferred pronouns not part of compelled speech. And of course, you remember last year when it was the no medical procedures or medications for transgender minors, and the seemingly endless attempt to regulate what books can be on what shelves in a local library, a vast majority of which contain an LGBTQ plus character, and it even considers homosexuality as obscene. Volunteers at the event cleaned up all of the hearts. Dameron said they plan to keep those hearts, but they don't quite know what they will do with them yet. We'll get to the 411 in just a moment, but you'll be thankful when it's over. That's the silver lining we tell ourselves as we navigate through the necessary inconvenience of road construction. But the light at the end of the tunnel, or the street, looks pretty dim for some downtown Boise businesses. With The last 18 months of road work and skyline additions, all of that keeps causing problems. Getting from point A to point B, already problematic. But what about when you get to point B and you find you are competing not just with customers, but contractors for the limited number of downtown parking spots? It's pushed some downtown business owners toward that thankful end, earlier than expected. Thankful for the end of their lease, that is, so they can leave the downtown core. Here's Andrew Bartline.
Opening a small business in the downtown core is a lifelong dream.
So I did create Baby Blues in Pink 3 years ago. Yeah.
But Shauna says the timing
That's what I'm dealing with
created a nightmare.
Yeah. Every day. I could have never imagined COVID, only to have this happen. 18 months of buildings surrounding us being built. The roads torn up and no parking.
Meaning fewer customers
There were cranes overhead, the building was shaking.
and fewer sales.
About 40%.
It's a common word on the street.
Kind of had got to the point where they couldn't make their appointments because they couldn't find parking.
And the city can't find answers.
You know, one response to every 5 emails.
Kevin Chapman owns Foot Dynamics, and he's keeping track of the wheels that seem to stop rolling.
The other day I had a picture I emailed to the mayor's office of 2 vehicles parked in front of our business from 9:30 to 5:30, which was when I came in and when I left. They got a ticket, and outside of that, they could park there all day.
And they are. The city wrote Kevin and Shauna in an email, quote, "We can ticket and enforce. We are not able to restrict who uses the public meters if they're paying users."
Just the other day, the one handicap parking we have here, someone parked there in their big work truck all day. There was 2 tickets on that. But it doesn't help the issue.
So what's the next step? There just has never been the next step. I do not blame any of the employees for parking in any of these spots because they have to park somewhere, but nobody's given them anywhere to park. And to me, that's the city.
But to Shauna,
Last-ditch effort
there's another authority in mind.
is to write a letter to Governor Brad Little. I'm writing to you on behalf of the small business owners in downtown Boise. We are in desperate need of help as it seems we have no rights or protection whatsoever. My hope is that something good can come from this, even if I don't make it through. I personally would be forever grateful if you can help us. There has to be something or someone that can help us.
Eventually, the bad dream will end.
We have 2 years left on this lease.
It just depends whether or not the business makes it out too.
All I can sit down here and do is worry if I'm gonna make it another month through this.
Foot Dynamics now has a branch open in Meridian. That was a direct response to the downtown construction. Kevin says his customers in Meridian regularly say they choose to go to that location because they are not willing to go downtown anymore and fight for parking. As for answers, the latest email from the city to those 2 business owners, Brian, essentially said you can buy reserved parking at parking garages or other lots around town. We're happy to get you in touch with the people to do that. That is not an answer that seems to satisfy those business owners.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess the story, or the part I take from this story is I can park in a parking space downtown, I get a ticket, and I can just leave it there for the rest of the day. I'm only going to get 1 ticket for that space, for that day. Is that what I'm to understand?
There was somebody in that handicap spot that got 2 tickets, and maybe it's
Maybe.
because it's handicapped, you can get another one. I'm not sure, but realistically, it seems that they'll get a ticket, but then they'll be there for 8 hours, and it's maybe that's worth the $20.
Yeah. I guess it's worth a shot to write a letter to the governor, but as we've learned, he's all about local control. So this will probably have to be handled on the Boise end. Anyway, thanks, Andrew. All right, let's get to that 411. So, because today, 4 more jurors made it through the first round of jury selection for Chad Daybell's murder trial. He's charged with the death of his wife, Lori, or his wife, that is his wife, I should say, and Lori Vallow's kids, and of course, his late wife. They still need about 30 more jurors to get to this total that they need. Jude Binkley has that and more in today's 411.
It's day 2 of jury selection in the Chad Daybell murder trial. He's charged with the deaths of his wife Lori Vallow's kids, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, as well as his late wife Tammy Daybell. He faces 8 counts including murder, conspiracy, and insurance fraud. A jury will decide if he's guilty and, if so, if he'll be sentenced to death. 16 jurors passed to the next phase yesterday. Today, the prosecution and defense selected 4 more, but they need a total of 50 prospective jurors. Then they each get 16 peremptory challenges where they don't have to explain why they're excusing jurors. Ultimately, they need 18 jurors, 12 jurors, and 6 alternates. A unique event went down in Caldwell today. Police say they received a 911 call reporting a shooting on Cromwell Street near Farmway and Eustick Roads around 10:30 this morning. Officers went to the home, but they say the people inside came out peacefully and no one was hurt. So now police are calling it a swatting call. That's when someone calls 911 with a hoax report of violence, so police are lured to a location where they might respond in an aggressive way. Police are trying to find out who made the call. That person could face charges and have to pay restitution. A lighter hoax is happening in a Boise neighborhood. Jill Hauser sent us these pictures and said the city is temporarily rerouting sewage above ground on her street. So the appropriate response, make your own local Schitt's Creek. Who doesn't like a poop pun? And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Jude Binkley.
Oh, what a beautiful day. Hope you enjoyed it. Now we're going to talk about the changes again. That's the thing about spring. It's very exciting. Gets up here, drops down here. Gets up here. We're going to do it again throughout this next week. In fact, by the end of next week, we can see temperatures above 70 again. But we have to get through what's going to happen this weekend. So, first of all, in the future cast, here's what's coming in. Now, this is later tonight, very early tomorrow morning up toward McCall. You may get a shower, maybe even an isolated thunderstorm, but more in the case of a shower. This is likely morning showers early, and then after that, these scattered areas are thunderstorms that come through for later tomorrow afternoon. Some of those storms could have strong gusty winds, hail, lightning, you know the routine. They could be stronger than some of the storms that we normally see. So we'll just have to watch that closely just in case that potential is there. Now, when you look here for tomorrow, this is going into Thursday. This is basically just rain. Now you see rain for Thursday, it's off and on. And then when you get down here just south of Boise, this is for Friday. You've got some rain showers, but also the possibility of some snow. that could be mixing in. So that gives you an idea what the temperatures will be like. First of all, 1/4 inch of rain through Thursday. What else? After we continue into Saturday, that could be a lot of rain. It could be well over 1/2 inch of rain. So we're starting out again, just as we had earlier, about rain all around the area. And then snow in the mountains could be very heavy, anywhere from 6 to 7 inches. Here's a look at your 7-day forecast. Some gusty winds here and there, some rain showers and thunderstorms tomorrow. This continues through Saturday, and then warming up next week.
Final minute of the show today on this Tuesday. Let's get to your comments. This one from Lindsay and Star. My income is from dealing crack from my house, so Boise can't discriminate against me based on how I make money. Asking for a friend. This is the source of income ordinance they passed earlier this year. I'm guessing that something illegal. In fact, no. If you have an illegal source of income, that's not covered by that. When it comes to the transgender community, it's interesting that they take up less than 3% of the population. So why does the legislature spend so much time writing legislation against them? I think it's fear of what I am not sure, says Scott. Great. I suppose the Idaho taxpayers end up paying to have all those little hearts cleaned up off the Capitol floor, says Mike, who's an Idaho taxpayer. Well, if you stayed with us to the end of that story, we said that the volunteers cleaned that up. Nobody else did it. They cleaned up every single one themselves. I heartily approve of the dramatically visual protest by the young trans individuals. Unfortunately, I fear our legislators are heartless, says Cecil in Meridian. Another result of our legislators' anti-transgender laws. BSU can't host an NCAA game because, well, NCAA supports transgender people's rights to participate in sports. They won't choose Idaho because the state does not honor that. Millions in lost revenue for our state, says Carol. You know, we've looked into this right after they passed the law in 2020. NCAA told us they're waiting to see what happens with the court case because that is still wrapped up in court. See you tomorrow.